What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Monday Show with my boy TJ, and we are going to go through all of the results from the weekend, all of the tournaments and GPPs, and who won them and who took them down, and how they did it. Going to talk a little bit about my sweat, how that ended out. The golf tournament as a whole was awesome. We're getting into a later part of the season. It's the last event coming up here, the PGA Tour Championship. We will look at it. The pricing is out for DraftKings. It is a different style with the staggered scoring and all that, but want to make a couple announcements first before I bring in TJ, just to let you guys know. So with the end of the PGA Tour season, this show will also go away with that. So this will be our final show, at least for now. We may bring it back for the majors, TJ and I, and we may bring it back again, likely bring it back actually when everything settles down and after football is over. But I did want to talk about that because, you know, we're still going to go through a lot here with this show. And then there will still be other shows that you'll see as it pertains to golf. All the same content will still be out there. It's just one of the things that'll go away. I'll still be on Tuesday with Cards and Noto. I'll still be on Wednesday doing my show with guests like bringing TJ back over. And then lastly, before I bring TJ in, just want to let you guys know I'm sitting here on the RotoGrinders homepage. Couple things. One, if you want to get to what we do in the weeks that we're going to be off and with the show gone away, it's just PGA results DB, and then you'll get into it. But I also want to make note quickly here on the right-hand side, the Lineup HQ NFL Q&A session with myself and Jordan Cooper at Blender HD. We are going to be doing a show Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be live. There's going to be YouTube question and answers. You guys can put in anything you want to know there as we go through it. And the goal and intention, I'm sure you know this from Jordan being here a long time and hearing through some of his stuff, but it's going to be a lot more about how you build for what you want to build versus what are these exact settings. You know, when I'm talking on the Wednesday shows when it pertains to PGA, sometimes, you know, what settings are you using for this week? And typically it's the same sort of concept of what you're trying to accomplish. We're going to be talking about all that and more. So check us out on Wednesday. It's going to be a great show. I'm super excited for that. Let's bring in my man, TJ Laessig. What's happening, brother? Brother, how you doing this week, man? I can't talk.
How's it going? Doing well.
Good.
Congrats to you on the queue that you hit this past weekend, and what a finish to that tournament yesterday. I was actually away for a decent bit of the weekend, so I didn't get to watch a ton of the golf, but was certainly watching down the finish on Sunday. And I mean, I can't remember ever seeing back-to-back putts made like that. I mean, I quickly went from DJ's putt being the best putt I think I've ever seen to less than 10 minutes later, another one easily trumping that. It was quite the finish between the top two golfers in the world.
Yeah, I mean, missing some of the tournament was absolutely fine. What you needed to be there for, like you said, was the end, and that was the incredible part. You know, seeing those putts back-to-back. I mean, the closest we had was kind of recent when you had JT Morikawa back-to-back in a playoff hole. You know, that speaks to some of the stuff. I know a lot of the talk on Twitter today around should the finals or the playoffs in the PGA world be a match play. And I know some people hate on it. I'm just personally a fan. It has nothing to do with DFS, the contest, not them, you know, DraftKings not running captain mode, whatever it might be. For me, it's more about that. Look how dialed in we are to something like that. And it wasn't even until, you know, DJ had to make the putt, first of all, to get it there, which was insane. I just saw the clip. They actually, if you didn't catch it, you should go check this out. PGA Tour just posted it for everybody out there watching. Neiman was being interviewed about how well his round went. Obviously, he crept his way up there. He didn't quite close it out or have a chance, but he made his way to the top there, third place finish. And in his interview, he hears the crowd that, you know, semi-crowd that we get nowadays in the times that we're in go nuts. And he goes, oh my God, he made that? Like, he couldn't believe DJ made that. He's like, that was not an easy putt, he says. So, you know, crazy to see that. Basically, you know, they said he's every golf fan right now. That's what it is. And that's why I like a match play. And just to see, you know, when we knew DJ and Rahm were heading to the playoff, I expected something great, you know, good, great, whatever. Not like that, though. That was incredible. To see Rahm drop that putt like that was, you know, just something you won't see. I think they said it was the longest on tour all year for a win or for like to close out a tournament. I forget what the stat was now, because now I think about Bryson making like a 97-footer one time. But either way, incredible event. Great way to end it. DJ, you know, comes up just short, but it was a great finish. Now we move on to this week. How'd your week go last week, and anything stand out for you in particular, TJ?
I had an okay week. Was pretty heavy on Rahm, which is obviously very helpful given the win there. So yeah, had a pretty decent week overall. I was definitely surprised at how difficult the course played. I think that all of us were expecting it to. Yeah, I don't know. I just was not expecting that at all. It seems like it kind of came out of left field with how difficult things were playing. But I kind of like that change of pace as we talk about. You know, we've gotten a lot of birdie fests over the last couple months, so it's interesting to see these guys struggle. And Rahm's kind of emerging as the difficult course king after winning the Memorial and now winning here at the BMW, the two most difficult challenges we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, super impressive for him. And for a guy that, you know, he's still so young, people may forget that, but people were really on top of him for being like, oh, he can only win the Euro events and all this. And I was certainly never on that train. Guy is a beast. He's won all sorts of events. I think I saw something again. I apologize, I don't have the exact stats in front of me for everything that I cite off in all my rambles, but it was something around the lines of like 50% top 10 ratio for this guy over like 100 events. Like, it's just insane how good he is and how consistent he is. And now he's getting the, you know, we talk about in DFS all the time, variance, and, you know, keep putting yourself in that position. It's going to happen. You know, we'll segue in a second, but that was sort of what's been happening for Rahm. And now to win, you know, at Muirfield with the Memorial, and then to win at Olympia Fields. And like you said, yeah, even on Wednesday, I dialed it back quite a bit, but still thought maybe, you know, -10, -14 range, call it an average -12. I thought we were going to see something like that with no outliers. I said, we're not going to get the DJ outlier. What we'd seen at the Northern Trust was sort of what I expected. But yeah, this was a complete curveball, really difficult conditions. You know, I trusted what DJ and Tiger had said, U.S. Open conditions. I just didn't think it was going to be that U.S. Open. I mean, people were joking, Winged Foot is jealous of Olympia Fields because they've got to set that thing up now, and that's the USGA, who always gets given a hard time. And I think realistically, this is the way we want to see an event play out. This course setup, this style, for a U.S. Open, I'm saying. Not every week. There's week we want, you know, people do want the birdie fest, and we like those. But yeah, overall, fantastic week. I'll bring up my lineup because you mentioned it, and I appreciate that. You know, everyone's talking about it. I post it because it's not really, you know, for me, it's more of like an accolades thing. Like, I like to get back to that World Championship. It's just fun to be in it. You know, I was talking with producer Devin before the show and saying, you know, the idea of it is a 200-man down to 100-man down to 40-man. It's over 3 weeks. And then in the 40-man, you're playing for that. Now, there's guaranteed money all along the way from 1,000 up to 500,000 if you win this thing. But the idea of getting into a 40-man where you're guaranteed 5,000 because you've made it that far already, and then 500 grand up top, that's a lot different than what I was playing in this week with 500 grand up top, as I'm sure, you know, many of you were, you know, 88,000 people or whatever it is playing in this event. So this was the lineup. I couldn't find the queue in Results DB. I don't think it's there. It was the $5 queue, you know, max 62 entries. So you just sort of pick and choose your best 62 and put it into that. And that's how it shakes down. And if you look here, you know, DJ, Rahm, this just came out of nowhere. You know, I liked Connors, Griffin, Joel Damon. I didn't really like Harmon that much. But again, when you get this many guys, it's kind of just how it fits. And the sad part was, you know, it's not, you know, it's just one of those things that it comes out. But this lineup, 1459, I think it was here. Yeah, so starting the day going in, TJ, I was sitting 8th and 14th going into round 4 in this tournament, in the tournament. This just goes to show for everybody how much it can change in a day. DJ, Hideki, Kisner, Na, Connors, and Neiman was sort of the outlier with Na that they needed to make a move. Obviously, one made a move. They both made a move all right. Na was just in the wrong direction. Neiman certainly moved up. And then this lineup was the 3v3 I had was, again, DJ, Hideki, Kisner, who were all way up the board going into Sunday. Scott was up there. Lanto was up there. And then I wake up and I'm like, okay, the other lineup's dead with Kevin Na just blowing it up, but Joel Damon's going off, right? So I'm feeling good about this. And then Kisner and Scott completely disappear. All of a sudden, that other lineup appears out of nowhere and got extremely lucky. You know, the John Rahm thing was one thing, but I was already in the playoff with both of them, just reviewing it. But I needed the DJ putt to go down. So that one to me, the 66-footer for Rahm is awesome for him in the tournament and everything. But once I made it, I was basically, DJ needed that for my 3 points. I was down a point. And if he makes just par there, I end up coming another second in the queue by 0.5. So, you know, boo-hoo, poor me. Overall, I'm excited. You know, it's the third time's the charm. Like I said, it was 2 times in the last 3 weeks that this had happened. I thought this was going to blow it up after all these, you know, other lineups sort of fizzled out. And overall, good week. Could have been a lot better, but I mean, this is still great. And it's a nice consolation prize. Happy to be back in. Again, thanks for the congrats. How did your week go overall as far as main slate, weekend, showdown? I know you said you might have been out of the loop for a little bit, but did you play anything over the weekend too? And then how did classic slate break down for you?
Yep. So classic slate, I was like slightly down on DK, but had a pretty nice FanDuel lineup where
nice
went for like a a full double in my main lineup there, and then played some weekend on FanDuel only. Oftentimes I play all the showdowns, but since I was out of town, I didn't want to make any stupid mistakes and try to do too much. I've learned over the years that it's okay to miss a slate every now and then and step away and enjoy yourself. So overall, solid week. A little disappointed that things are winding down here, but we'll be back for some of the majors in the fall, which will be good. And obviously we have football coming up, which for some reason I still has not registered in my brain that we're going to have NFL games in just a few couple short days here.
It's just crazy, right? The mix and what we're just so close. And normally you're anticipating one versus the other and all that. And now it's just the way it's all going to come together. And at the same time, I mean, we're going to have majors going on during football. We're going to have the Masters. We're going to have all this stuff happening, at different times. So it's going to be, really interesting to see how that plays out. Going to be a lot of fun, content packed. Of course, I'm going to be around. I got a lot of different shows that I'm doing as far as NFL are concerned. Like I mentioned at the top, I'm still going to be around for a bunch of PGA shows, the main shows, all the stuff that you guys expect. But let's break this down, man. This is the $25. First up top was $500K. AJ Billig, 453.5 with just 2 entries. Takes down the $500K. He's got John Rahm, Tony Finau, Hideki, Kokrak, Brendan Todd, and Lanto Griffin. And what I thought was surprising is no DJ. And it's probably goes to show, not saying my lineup's terrible because it got there. I'm happy, but it is tough in these events to get like a double stud lineup, like a Rahm DJ, and get it to play out and have value. Obviously, 416 that I had scored just to compare it against wasn't even close to the top here. So it just goes to show that. But in a smaller 2,000 or 2,200 person field in a queue, it can still get you there. So you do got to kind of monitor that a little bit, but it's worth taking a shot. I didn't play very many of them, but what do you think about AJ Billig's lineup here? It looks pretty good. Obviously, it took down the money, but just the overall setup of the build and then how the results played out.
Yeah, I like the build here overall. It's got kind of one of the two main ownership structure breakdowns that we tend to see at the top, right? We have the one where it's like the 2-2-2 of 2 over 20, 2 in between 10 and 20, and 2 under. The other one is this kind of 3-3 breakdown where you've got 3 guys in the 15% range and then 3 guys that are lower owned. So love that from the perspective there. And you can also see that the ownership breaks down directly with this person's higher priced guys, right? So starting with Rahm, hitting 2 guys in the 8K and Finau and Matsuyama. Love all 3 of those plays there. Rahm was my top overall play for the week that I just thought, in these stronger field events, some of these more challenging courses, I think Rahm is probably my straight up pick over anyone. Finau just continues to put up those results, right? He did it a little. He had his big Sunday when he didn't need it, or it wasn't enough to help him win. But I think he shot 5 or 6 under yesterday, and then Hideki was just like chipping in like crazy too, wasn't he? He feels like he
a lot
had
of
a
around the
crazy
green
week.
and putting for sure.
Yeah, a lot of definitely a unique way of Hideki getting there, but like that overall. And then the 3 lower owned, cheaper priced guys at the bottom, all people that I think have relatively strong recent form. Kokrak has low key, I think that's now 3 top 15s in a row for him. So someone who's always can bomb it out there and like very, very long term, a decent enough golfer. And then Todd always finds his way up there. I think he gained like 7 strokes putting again, but that's just what Brendan Todd does. So eventually we can't keep saying that that's just luck. I mean, he's just a very good putter. I think that's a fact at this point. And then Lanto, he was in your lineup as well, right? He's been able
Lanto's been so solid under 7K. It just continues. And this week's even more interesting when we get to the preview for the Tour Championship later. We'll have a look at it, but yeah, a couple things stood out to me. Kind of what you said. I mean, keeping the ownership low overall too, right? 65%, give or take. I'm just putting my, quick fast math hat on. It's around that. And I think that's important in a tournament of this size where it was a smaller field. And if you're going to use max cap, which AJ Billig did use the full $50,000 provided, it makes sense. So I do like the overall setup of the build. Thinking about some of the stuff, like I said, funny part about Finau was like, imagine if he had won this event at how it was starting to get a little bit more difficult as the afternoon went on. He's sitting at +1 or sitting at -1 in the clubhouse. It just would have been so comical if he just, the other guys blow it and Finau ends up getting a win that way, because it was funny. Like you said, him and Todd, who both happen to be in this lineup, are two guys that have sort of cracked under pressure on the Sundays, right? I know Todd's closed tournaments this year, but he also had some 54-hole leads that he didn't close, and not only didn't close, but left a lot out there, sevens and eights on par fours and stuff like that, just getting the yips back a little bit. So there was that, but overall a solid build for the way it went. It looks like it was almost built for, the strategy of the tournament's going to be very hard now. Go with this because you got a guy like Rahm who, like you said, sort of building that reputation, but has done well at pretty much all courses. And then if you think about who just did well at the Memorial, he would have been in there, like Finau. And Finau had a bad Sunday at the Memorial, I remember, because it cost me a lot of money. But I do know that, you think about a guy that's going to come top 10 in a 70-man event. Well, he's doing it in 156-man events. So definitely fine play. Same for Decky. Todd, guy hits fairways and greens, has been there all year. Upside for his price. Lanto as the low-owned. The under 7K, the performance, and then just hope that Kokrak, and like you said, Kokrak turns it on, has been lately low key, but last year the same thing. He actually snuck into the Tour Championship at the last spot last year. He's considered Canadian. I'm Canadian, so I was bringing this, little tidbits up, but now this year was nice to see Mac Hughes do the same. So not in this lineup, off topic, but Kokrak really tried his best, man. Had a good Sunday. I think he ended up finishing 41st. You need to be top 30. I know it was a long shot, but I'm just saying, keep his head down, the mindset there, and keep grinding away. That was good to see. So the overall build makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing I knew, I wanted to point out and that stood out to me was just kind of what I expected. And I got to see, I'm pretty sure Morikawa had a fantastic weekend, and Berger was sort of up there. But other than that, Xander, I guess they're in the mix, but they weren't needed. And sort of that was my hot take of the week was I was saying that 9K range really was not important or not as important. I really did like just Morikawa, and then moving on, the 8K range was so stacked. You think about Finau, Matsuyama, it had Reed, Scott, all these other guys. Not all of them did good. I'm just saying who was in there. It was really tough to validate that 9K range up above. Anything else on this lineup or this tournament as a whole there?
No, great lineup, and always good to see someone being able to take it down with only the two entries there. So
yeah, members wise, Paz 1171 was in second, 5 lineups. Go Sixers, Go 76, just a fantastic player in all sports. You see him around getting heated up right now. He's got football coming around. For those of you that remember last year, he's got some heavy duty football weekends ahead of him, and I've seen multiple, high 6-figure. I don't know if I've seen a 7-figure yet, but he puts a lot into that, and good on him. A really solid grinder. Peter Gibbons, the same. He's always around. Tiki Tyler, Zion Kress, all these guys. So a lot of multi-enters were up there as far as, 150 lineups was the way to get there. But 2 and 5 to take it down first and second. Awesome to see for 6-figure scores, especially, AJ Billig at the top, and then Paz 1171, an RG member. So with that said, we'll move it across. The finishes are a little bit different, you'll see here. We're going to go to the $5 drive to green. There's more people in the field. Interestingly enough, actually lesser score took it down, which is normally not the case from all these reviews that we do. And you see Go Sixers Go there again. Same thing, second place right there, picking up another 30K. He had 75,000 in the previous event. But P. Donnelly 414, 449.5. Very similar lineup. I think it's just Fitzpatrick and Damon are the only two swaps, right? It was, what was it? Lanto Griffin.
Yeah, and Kokrak.
Yeah, so another one of those things you see some of the same. We can look at Go Sixers Go lineup just to get another look, and his is just another 2v2 Woodland Neiman. It's going to be a lot of that. I was trying to find DJ Rahm lineups if there was any more up top. This was the closest without Rahm. K-Mac, another RG member, had DJ, no Rahm, but then had Neiman, Finau, Decky, Kokrak, Steele, all the guys that actually, besides, Steele, that one hurts a little, but the rest actually did stuff over the weekend, so that was there. And then I don't think I saw, is this it?
There's
here?
one.
Yeah, I think this is it here. Scott, 0084. 150 lineups. It was a DJ, Rahm, Neiman, Hughes, who I just mentioned. Man, this is a good lineup. See, this is what's crazy, right? You look at something like this.
That's crazy that doesn't win, right? You would think that if you're going to have a DJ Rahm lineup, all those guys were around there.
That's what stood out to me right away looking at it, right? You got, but I guess you know what it is? It's a classic thing in PGA DFS, TJ. It's the recency bias, and Hughes and Joel Damon are at 57 and 55 points. But why do we think about them as they should be right there? Because they had a hot Sunday run. And you're like, of course that they'd be in the winning lineup, but no, that's not the case, right? Points are what matter. We're going to get to that when we get to it later. Don't think there's a lot of time to be spent on it. This is where it got a little bit interesting for me, is something more like, the 888, because now those two are so similar, the large fields. This was only 1,000 people or less. Sparty Party 27 took it down with a single bullet. Common theme for this show that we've been doing, TJ, where it's just one lineup can get the job done, right? We've seen it time and time again. A lot of people worry about, I'm up against so many people. Yes, McLovin has 30. He still comes away with 50 grand, profitable, makes money, whatever. But Sparty Party up there with one lineup, 405 points versus what we saw before with 453 and 449 or whatever it was. What do you think about his lineup as far as the overall construction is?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you notice is ownership's slightly getting inflated with Rahm and Matsuyama. They were like 15, 17%. As we go higher in stakes, lower in number of entries, they'll tend to inflate a bit. I think, general construction wise, definitely like it, getting 2 studs in there, one of the middling guys, and then 3 lower priced guys that are more of the punt plays that are going to be lower owned. Fratelli was someone that I had been looking at a bit as well this week. He's been playing pretty well decently. Ben On, I think, fits the profile on some more difficult courses like this, just because he's got a pretty decent around the green game. So for those tournaments where it's not all about putting, that's when you want to get Benny On in there. And then Harmon, that was a guy that you played as well too, and he's been pretty inconsistent, I would say. Not even weekend to weekend, but like literally round to round, but has shown that he can go low on any given round or any given weekend. So I like the construction overall. I mean, I think Rory at 14% is interesting to me. I feel like every week it's like, oh, Rory's going to be so low owned. Like that's the contrarian play, but like it's only 21% versus 14% with Rahm versus Rory. So to me, that's just a general takeaway of like, when it comes to the expensive guys, for the most part, they're all going to have some sort of ownership. So just kind of go with the ones that you like and the ones that you think are the best play. And I just think that someone like Rory is almost never going to be that low owned because people like to play Rory.
Right. And what he is basically obviously much better golfer and much, more expensive usually, but the fan base, as far as, DFS and darling and playing him, it's like Ricky Fowler. No matter how bad he does, Rory was on a bad run, didn't have any top 10s. Again, they're not comparable. Rory's here and Ricky's down here as far as what their achievements are and how they're seen by the, general golf world out there because of the majors and the accolades and all. They're not comparable in that sense. But what I'm saying, when it comes to DFS and ownership, you'd always see where Ricky was just terrible sitting at 8,600 and he would still come out with like 10 to 15% ownership because just everybody loves Ricky Fowler. It's the same thing here. It's a little bit different. It's not as much as the fandom as it is people saying, look, Rory's just too good to let this continue to happen. And like you said, all these things went up. The ownerships as far as stakes, and you go up to 888, this tournament's $888 buy-in. All of these guys are higher than they were in the other range. And a guy like Rory went up even higher because that's where people are thinking, I'm going to pivot over to that. And it's actually sort of the reverse because now everybody's thinking that, and that's how you're going to get your upside. Now, in this case, it worked, which is amazing and awesome for Sparty Party 27. But I'm saying the thought process is kind of like you said. If it's going to be almost 15, call it, and 21, 22, it's kind of just pick who you like, or in this case, play them both and make it work. But yeah, you could have, had more optimal lineups and ones that would have passed it. Let's look at a couple others here. So Rahm, Hideki, English. Just going back to your point on Benny On, I think that's a good call because, the way it is, if his ball striking's on like it can be, then you're set because you're getting a $6,800 guy that can really have some upside for you. And if it's not, he's still got a pretty good around the green game and doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He normally is, keep in mind, a lot of these guys that, we get so frustrated about over their putting is typically they're missing for our scoring points. They're still making pars, and this week par was a good score. So that's something like that with a guy like Benny On. You do have to keep that in mind when you're building your lineups, and you're building accordingly for what you want your lineups to achieve for that said week. Again, I was, hit, at a left field as far as the, winning score was in the end. I didn't expect that at all, but awesome still. Like I said, the event was great. This next time, I'm just going to look at a couple more here. Sissonius has John Rahm, Hideki Matsuyama, Harris English, Henley, Connors, Neiman. And I bring it up just because, it's another extremely different build. And this has a few more names that we didn't really see at all. Besides, like English, Henley, Connors. They're all just sort of getting mixed in and still scoring almost 400 points.
Yeah. Yeah, then it's interesting. I think what you start to see in some of these, like we were just talking about, is the profile of the ball striker that maybe isn't the best putter. I mean, look at this lineup. You've got Hideki, you've got Henley, you've got Connors, and you've got Neiman. I would say that all four of those guys pretty much fit that mold of being historically solid ball strikers and tending to struggle with the putter. Harris English, he had a tough Sunday, at least I know. Played him a little bit.
It was a rough week for Mr. English.
I mean, I thought he was definitely a little bit overpriced at 8,300, but I still think that he was a solid play. I thought it was pretty close between him and Adam Scott, right? I think Adam Scott was at 8,200. So
he was 8,200. Yeah, I was trying to find a Scott lineup to see what his
Scott was crushing him all weekend, but then I think they both struggled on Sunday. So the gap was probably not as big. So
46 and a half. Wow. In the end, my God, that was so bad, man. He was crushing, but yeah, an event like this too, the position points are so important, right? And that's where, again, we were all on the page, Wednesday of maybe, okay, it's not going to be as crazy low scoring, but we aren't going to go that aggressive just because of that. And it almost was one of those things where you had to, because that's what it really came down to. This lineup also looks a lot like to do with recent form. You look at guys coming in like English, Henley, Rahm. There's a lot of guys that were, needing stuff or doing well coming in. And then McLovin, look at his lineup just to round it out before we get to the last. And then we'll spend a little more time on the preview just because it's kind of different this week. But his was Rahm. Cantley ended up, finishing quite well, actually. And then, when you think about it, 61.5 versus what we just saw with Scott and English at their 83, 8,200. Reed did not come through, right? 8,800. But again, the 9K range was just so unnecessary. It really wasn't needed when you had all these guys, Cantley, Reed, Matsuyama, Scott, English. The 8K range was just stacked. And then, Munoz, Joel Damon, these guys are all, Munoz is another new one you see down there, but you basically had, the ability. And if you look here, the interesting part with McLovin's lineup is the ownership, right? He's got 21, 17, 14, 21, 21, and then, Munoz is his one-off. So it's, huge ownership overall, but with a really super low owned Munoz to sort of be different and still use the full salary. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. I have to imagine that McLovin and no one was expecting Damon to be 21% owned. I mean, that's right. Like, I'm sure when he was building this that he probably thought that Damon and Munoz would both be under 10%, or maybe Damon's right around 10%. So
you'd think that. Shout out to Notorious, our boy, because he was all over Joel Damon, and I think he's moving the needle when it comes to that, because that's an insane.
Could be. I mean, that's really high for Damon. That's really, really, really high for him. I think Gooch was at the same price too, or 6,600 or something, and I think he was relatively chalky in there too. So I mean, I think that'd be probably the going in assumption would maybe be that Damon would come in lower owned. So it's definitely a chalkier lineup, but again, it also just goes to show, like, there's a reason that players are chalky, and it's because they're good high equity plays. And just because a lineup is chalky doesn't mean it can't finish up there in a tournament. Now, obviously, when you're in the smaller fields, that becomes more and more the case, right? You can get away with it a lot more. Whereas we almost would never see this come in the top 5 in a big tournament, just because you need to have basically the perfect combination if you're going to have a bunch of guys that are 20% owned across the board. But overall, real solid. Love the build structure of having one elite play, skipping over the 9K range like you talked about, and then having 2 punts. I thought that the kind of 2 punt structure was pretty optimal this week, and those are two good ones to pick, just from a results perspective. So
McLovin's my guy. I love this guy, and he knows what he's doing. So it's like you said, it's sort of a build for where you're at. And we talk about this a lot of times. We don't see these builds in the $25, and like you said, it's just as total ownership goes. But I think the bigger thing is when you look at like the 2 6K guys alone should have been sort of contrarian in a sense, where I know a lot of people want to use them, but how many were going to use Joel Damon and Munoz? And in the end, it's a unique lineup, so there's nothing to really talk about there when it comes down. It's not that it's not unique. It just goes to show that there's more ways, right? That's what we're always trying to look at here, is how can you get to the top? What are other successful players doing, and how do they have their builds set up, and see where they go with it? You look at another one here, Peter Gibbons. We saw him just crushing it in the $25. here's his best in the 888 to round this one out. And it's, similar to McLovin almost. Again, two extremely good players, as far as DFS is concerned. And you look at this, Jon Rahm, Rory, Hideki, Connors. It's the 6K punt, but he's still got 4 guys over 14%. And then he's actually doesn't have the 3% guy in like Munoz as McLovin had, but he's got the other guy in Connors. So again, there's plenty of ways to get there and counterbalance your lineup and make it happen. But good job to these guys. Good job to Sparty Party 27 up top, taking down first for 200,000. Can look quickly at the $200 single entry. I had that up just to see, but it's just much of the same, right? So congrats to Brian XLL, 100,000. He had Rahm, Finau, Hideki, Henley, Kokrak, and Joel Damon. It's very similar to the lineup that we saw earlier, right? It's a little bit, maybe a one-off or a 2v2 or something like that. PSU Mav, member at RG, got second, 40,000. He had DJ, Rahm, Harmon, similar to mine in a sense of those ones. And then Kokrak, Steele, Damon, a lot of upside in there. Couple, 2 guys under 7%. DJ was right around 10, so pretty close there. Nice build. He's also the winner of the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast Listener League, which Kenny and I will talk about later. And I should note with the mention at the top of the show of everything that's changing, that will also still be ongoing. So for those of you asking and thinking about that podcast with Kenny Kim and myself, we'll still be bringing it to you every week for the Safeway, for everything, this week for the Tour Championship, then the Safeway, and then moving it from there. All the events as they come back. US Open is after that, and then sort of the normal swing season as they bring it back. So it's going to be fast and furious when it comes to all of this content. I do want to spend, though, and this is why I want to jump ahead and skip some of these last ones, TJ. I'm not sure how much you played it last year, but last year was the first time that the staggered scoring was brought into play. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, I've got it up here for you. This is how the Tour Championship leaderboard is going to begin. And why I want to bring this up is because it brings an element into DraftKings, which we'll get to in a second. But essentially what it is, it's based on how they're, how they've done and where they landed in the rankings. They get some advantage. So DJ gets much of the advantage at 10 under. But again, because Rahm is right there behind him and Thomas and so on and so forth, only the first place guy gets the 2-stroke lead. After that, it goes down to 1 stroke. So Rahm over JT is 1, JT over Webb is 1, so on and so forth. With the idea being that, this can change in a heartbeat, right, TJ? What's your thoughts on the overall structure? And then, obviously over 72 holes, this can change really quickly as far as these guys at the top go.
Yeah, I think it should be pretty interesting from a DraftKings perspective, and we'll get into the pricing, but obviously they completely revamped how they price as a result of this, which I think is a cool dynamic as well. My initial gut on it would be like with the way these scores are starting. I think that, and I haven't even looked at the Vegas odds, but DJ, Rahm, and JT, just given the lead that they already have and the fact that they're DJ, Rahm, and JT are probably going to be massive favorites just in terms of outright win equity. And then to me, once you get, if you're starting at -4 or -3 versus even, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference, because the difference in the birdies that get made between those guys is what the DK scoring will come down to, more so than the finishing points. So from a build perspective, you probably want to have 1 or 2 guys in your lineup that you could see winning it outright. And then after that, think more about the scoring and, try. In some ways it's similar to Sunday Showdown, but obviously weight's still much heavier towards the placement points, just because the birdies are worth more in the Sunday Showdown. But it's a similar type of format. You look at the bottom of the list, someone like Victor Hovland, he's super, super cheap this week, way cheaper than he would ever be. So I think you'll see guys like that get popular just because he can run up the leaderboard and make some birdies in the process. Should be interesting.
Certainly important to remember, DraftKings versus betting and all these factors, because it's not likely that any of these guys would ever win the tournament down here sitting at even. Right. It's so hard for them, no matter what their output's going to be, to compete with someone, even if DJ has the worst week and drops to 3rd or 5th or whatever. Last year, I'll give you a quick example, but I'll finish that point, but you got to remember that this is for daily fantasy. It's totally different. Will these guys win? No. Will they be on the winning lineup? Possibly. So you got to remember that, right? That's sort of the key takeaway. And I'll just bring up last year. I don't have it in front of me of how it began, but I just remember off the top of my head and some of the pre-search that I've done going into this week, is Rory started last year in 5th, I believe, and ended up winning. And JT was in 1st and fell down to 3rd. But the biggest one, just to give you guys an idea, you're like, oh, Jon Rahm, there's no way. He's on fire right now. He just beat DJ in a playoff. He can't be stopped. He won Memorial. All these same sort of factors were talked about, not quite as in depth because, Rahm's on a little bit of a different run. And I think still a more superior talent by quite a bit. But Patrick Cantley is a great golfer. 70, 71, 75, 73. And the reason I bring him up, because he started in the 2-hole last year at 8 under and fell all the way down to T21. So I haven't went in reverse yet. I'm excited to do that after this. I'll talk about it more on the podcast that Kenny and I do, but I will look at, sort of who made the biggest jump from the bottom to the top, but definitely keep that in mind when you're looking at this. This is sort of what the board looks like. Let's look at the pricing quickly here. The first thing that stands out is obviously DJ 15.2 and Rahm 12.7. It's only 2 strokes. What I want to ask you is, do you think DJ is going to be very high owned, or do you think that they sort of priced him out of what could be optimal based on it just being a 2-stroke lead? And again, he could be, 3-4 holes in and he could be flip-flop with Rahm, and that's a 10-point swing on the position points that he'll start with. And then it can obviously go either way from there. But what's your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I got to think that he'll still be owned, but it's got to be lower owned. They really, really priced him up, and rightfully so. I think that if he was also sitting at 13K, then he'd probably be way too chalky. So I think it's a lot of juice to lay. I mean, you're looking at a 2,500 difference between DJ and Rahm for 2 strokes. I mean, Rahm, I think, will be the most popular starting point. Would be my guess. Just given that you get the 2,500 savings on DJ. He's only 2 strokes behind, which, like you just said, could be made up in a matter of 2 holes, literally. And he's playing so well. So I think that we'll see DJ come in lower owned, and more people will gravitate maybe towards that Rahm and JT area. So that was my first look at
I agree.
Optimal build is how do you play Rahm and JT together?
Okay, I was going to ask you that next. I was going to say it's really you can make DJ lineups no problem. Are they the likely what you see as what could be optimal? Maybe try some out if you got 20 plus lineups and get them in there. But for me, it doesn't look right as of now. See as the week goes on. I also want to see sort of what ownership projections say as the week goes on. I do think you've got it pegged here perfectly. I'm sort of leaning JT over Rahm just because, I know it's a tough course factor again, but I think Rahm is really going to be the most owned and heavily owned for good reason. But at the same time, it's 1 stroke, and JT is again, $800 less behind him. Webb, $900 cheaper than that for 2 strokes behind Rahm. Like, it's a lot of guys here. And then you go, Morikawa is 2.3K cheaper, has been crushing it in his own right. And he's right there behind Rahm. 3 strokes over 72 holes. It's literally nothing. It can happen on the first day. Again, it's not really likely that everybody at the top is going to collapse. That gives all the guys at the back a chance to get back in it. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying at the top can shake up quite a bit. So there is going to be some leverage plays to be had. Where are you at in this next range? Sort of Webb, Morikawa, Bryson, and then keep in mind, guys, too, Rory. Got to talk about him quickly before I get back to you, TJ, is he said it and is very vocal about it. His wife, Erica's pregnant with their first. He's having a little girl. Obviously, having your first child, for those of you that are parents, is, a life-changing event like no other. So Rory said it already. He said, I don't care. He said, I'll be at a lot of tour championships. I know that. Confident in his game, but he should be. And at the same time, he said, there's only one time for this. So he's like, I'll be there if it's happening. And again, that would to be expected. But that could change the slate quite a bit because, it drops it right down to 29. And the way the pricing's set up, I don't know if they accounted for that or not. It's hard to tell, but it sort of changes things quite a bit because then you almost would have $1,000. You have $800 between Bryson and Hideki. Again, if, but they said any day now. Also keep in mind, lastly, before I get back to you there, is that normally this happens, I believe, during TPC Boston week where it's the holiday weekend and it's the Friday to Monday tournament. That is happening this week now because the way it's set up for the Tour Championship. So this is not a Thursday through Sunday event. This is a Friday through Monday event. So just another thing to remember. But yeah, sorry, I'll let you answer the question, TJ. Webb, Morikawa, Bryson, that's an interesting range. What's your thoughts on that? And again, going back to the leaderboard, it's very close. I think it matches up almost, except Bryson because of his odds over a guy like Berger or English are going to have to be up there, and they're using betting odds typically on DraftKings. So what are you thinking about for that range?
Yep. I think once you get down here, you want to factor in those starting placement points, but at the same time, I think just pick the guys that you like. Morikawa is probably my preference off the jump. Just like you said, he's been playing well, has shown that he can do it. He's starting at what, minus five. So I think he has that win equity and that chance to win if he does well. And I mean, the interesting thing there is just the upside that presents itself of like, okay, if Morikawa wins, then that means that he probably went really low, right? Because he has 5 strokes that he needs to make up for. Whereas DJ could win with less upside because he doesn't need to score as many DraftKings points in order to win the tournament. So I think it's just a really interesting week in general. We don't talk about it much in golf, but to kind of come up with a narrative or a story that you want your lineup to tell of like, okay, here's a lineup where, I'm going to make the assumption that DJ and Rahm fall off and neither of them finish in the top 5 somehow. And if that is what happens, what becomes the optimal lineup and how do I think through that process? And maybe the way you think through that is, okay, I think Morikawa is going to, go super, super low and end up winning the tournament at 15 under or 16 under, whatever a reasonable score is there. So I think it creates some fun dynamics like that.
I'll go back here. Yeah, we love creating narratives. If you want to create one, Rory won this thing at 18 under last year by 4 strokes, and he started in the 5-hole like Morikawa. So that's exactly what can happen, right? And again, JT was number 1 last year going in and finishes 3rd. These guys were all up there. Brooks was up there and falls, but like they still hold on to their score. But then keep in mind too, East Lake, this is another extremely challenging course where it's going to be tough conditions and, it's built for that. Rory just destroyed last year. If you look here, it's 66, 67, 68, 66. Talk about a great week. I mean, that's how you do it. Can Morikawa do that? I don't know. I know Morikawa really struggled last week over the first couple days and then turned it on heavy over the weekend. So he has sort of done it in the right factor where he's pieced it together, got some confidence coming off the weekend, and now gets to go in. JT, by the way, chipped in to end his round. The last hole he plays, the hole 72 for him on the week. So he's got some momentum as well and says he likes this course. Not going to spend time on all of it, but I mean, like, let's go, big on this one from Rory down to Finau. That's the entire 8 and 9K range. Obviously, you only got a 30-man field. Just if a couple guys stand out to you, that's all.
Yep. So Xander definitely stands out to me, as I feel like he always does. My typical Xander over Berger, even though Berger continues to outperform him. But Xander definitely, I'm not even sure. Did Berger beat Xander again this past weekend? Let's see. Berger got 25th. What did Xander end up at? Probably around the same, I feel like. 20. They tied. T25 for each of them. So I mean, I think that they're both good plays, kind of as always, right in that range. Again, once we get into this point, if you're starting 2, 3, 4 under, I think it's all kind of the same, and it's really just a matter of who you think is going to score from that point. So Berger and Xander definitely stick out to me in that range. Finau as well, all the way down at the bottom. I think those would be my top 3. The Rory one's interesting because I think he definitely stands out too at 9-7. So we'll want to continue to monitor that situation throughout the week. Like, in your view, is it he could potentially leave in the middle of the tournament?
Correct. Yeah, I was just going to say that. That's what makes this.
So you basically have to almost X him out. Well, not of like MME stuff, but obviously if you're trying to make 1 to 3 lineups, you don't want to take that.
Yeah, we have to wait and see. We need more information for sure. But as it stands and the way they were describing it and the way Rory was saying it, and they're talking like any day, literally, that makes it a bigger deal because, I mean, if she has, and the other factor is it's, who knows? This is Rory McIlroy. He could do anything. If she, has the baby on Wednesday, does he say, look, I was there for the birth, so I'm still all in on this tournament. That's my job. I'm a professional. I've got to go out and perform. Or does he say, I'm going to be there with my wife and child, and that's how it's going to go, and I'm just going to take this year? It's really up in the air. We don't know. It's all speculation, so I don't want to spend too much time, but you do make a good point for your builds because of that. Now, if nothing comes of it, I'm still with you on the MME thing, because what if she has the baby on Saturday? He could come out with a 65 blazing, take over, and be right up there in the mix, and then she has the baby overnight on Friday or whatever. Who knows? And then he's going to take off. That's all we know. So you will have to factor that in. One key point that you brought up, like I said, in the spirit of not going through just every name, I like the guys you said. I'm with you. Very early first look. But I think, what you want to take away, I don't know if it even needs to be said, but definitely don't be, I'm going to take Berger over, who did you just mention, Xander, because he's got a one-stroke lead on him. I mean, that means nothing, like I said, on 72 holes. So don't even play who you want to play.
Right. Here. Don't have that be the reason for why you're going to pick one guy over the other.
Not even as a tiebreaker.
Valid reason. Yeah, it shouldn't even, aside from the top guys, it really shouldn't even be a factor, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we already talked about that with DJ almost being a determining factor on why not. Now we'll see. Again, if you want to think that DJ is going to go pull, DJ mode like he did, it's not going to be that 11 under beat the 30 under, beat the field by 11 strokes type thing that we saw at the Northern Trust. But I'm saying if you think he's going to go in DJ takeover mode where he just cruises the whole way and just wins this thing by 3 or 4, then you'll have to make that decision and see what your builds look like, right? Mm-hmm. Mess around with them. I always like to do 10, 15 hand builds, even on a Monday. If I'm playing 150, I'll do maybe 5, 10, 15 in that range just to get a feel for it. And I might even change them later. It's just more of, get that feel of what the build process or construction process is going to look like for the week. Dropping down to round it out here, TJ, we'll end with this. Scotty Scheffler. I guess we'll do a little Scotty Scheffler down to answer. Let's do the next range here quick. Just maybe 1 or 2 guys that stand out there for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hovland definitely stands out just in terms of, Hovland and Hatton, probably guys that are typically in that 8K range, that their prices now come all the way down, and it's come all the way down because of their starting position. Although Hatton at -2, Hovland at 0. Again, it doesn't really matter because
I wonder if things like
the
so
hard for one of them to win. But
like Hovland and Neiman.
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Neiman's an interesting one to look at. Answer was the darling 2 weeks ago, and now it's just I don't know. I'm not really super interested in him anymore at the moment. Scheffler continues to play pretty solid, up at 7-9. Where does he start at? He starts at.
He is sitting there. It's 2 under as well. Yeah, most of these guys are, and I think that's the overlooked range, right? Scheffler, Todd, Im, maybe even Hatton. We'll see. I don't know. Got to see how it shakes out. But I think like Hovland, Neiman. And Kiz even has been, as of late, answer. Kiz will for sure, because I was bringing this up all last week and why I liked him last week, and he just didn't work out on Sunday for me. But he really likes money, first of all. And second of all, this is a spot he's done well. He's got a 7th and 9th here in 2 of the last 3 years. So, I mean, if he gets you a 7th or 9th coming out of 21st, now, that's been part of it. I got to go back and look at exactly which ones and what happened. But where's it at here? Kisner. Yeah, 9th was last year. Again, don't know where he started at, but my point is he's done well here in the past. And if you want to just say, forget the staggered stuff, go back here and look at Kisner. 71, 70, 68, 68. Those are some pretty good rounds on a course that's this tough. So I think he could get a little love, but definitely Hovland will be the chalk from what I can see right now. Neiman for sure after that Sunday and some of the stuff that he's been interviewed about and all these things that people just link onto and say, I'm going to go with this guy. And then let's round it out. Let's get out of here. So anybody in the punt play range that you're just like, I got to have them with Munoz, you got Horschel, Lanto, Kevin Na, Palmer, Champ, Hughes, Smith, and Leishman, Mr. Plus 30, sitting down at the very bottom, yet he's in 25th in the tournament. He starts with a one stroke under par. So what are you at down here?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's anyone that you got to have in this range, but I also think that you can certainly dip down that low. I mean, Palmer would probably be Palmer and Horschel, I feel like, would be my 2 favorites off the jump. Maybe even Cam Champ as well. But yeah, again, when we're picking these guys, we're not expecting them to win or even to really come in the top 10. You're just trying to get them to move themselves up the leaderboard, make some birdies and score some points. So definitely when we're going this low, not really too concerned about whether they're starting at even or what, like Munoz is -3 and only 5.9K. But it's also Munoz and he's just, generally speaking, not as good a golfer as Horschel or Palmer. Type thing.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. And you're already getting a little bit contrarian by doing that, I think, because if you look at a guy like Munoz, maybe not, because people will say what you just said. But I think, I'll have to have some Lanto. I can't go off him now. If I'm going to play him under 7K, I know it's technically not. If you work out a normal structure, payout structure, he's going to be right around the same. But at 5.6K and starting in the 16 spot, it's going to be, it's the way we just talked about. I'll end it on this is that, I'll give you a final thoughts, but it's what we just talked about. Why are you stressing over 1 or 2 strokes? Lanto's only got 2, but because of that, and because he's so high up the board and his price is so low, I assume him to be one of the highest chalk pieces down here, and people just don't want to play, maybe it's him and Munoz because of where their position is on the board, but that I think is a mistake. Like you said, a guy like Horschel can get hot in an instant. A guy like Kevin Na, any of these guys can heat up. Even Mackenzie Hughes, he's done it more often than you think. He had to play his way in, not just last week. This was over the last few weeks to get himself into this spot, and you think he's going to just let that crash and burn? I don't. Cam Champ, the same thing, a winner on tour multiple times now. Leishman even, no one's going to probably go back to him because of the plus 30 and he looks completely out of it. It's just a different event. That's the whole point. You want to talk about DJ and his run. You got a guy like him shooting 80-80 and you say it's still a great golfer. Leishman did not just turn into the worst golfer in the world overnight. He did talk a lot about not, he took the shutdown very serious. He stayed at home. He didn't touch a club. Obviously there's rust there, but when there's only so many guys down in this range that can make your lineup work, I think you should get a little bit unique in that sense versus just trying to leave a bunch of money on the table. So hope you guys like the show. I'll give it to you, TJ. Just any final thoughts on this structure this week up and coming, and anything else that you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I'll just say, with only 30 players in the field, don't spread yourself too thin. Mm-hmm. I think that, we talk about the size of player pools, and you're probably going to want to and have to exclude people entirely from your player pool, and maybe it's not going to be the most comfortable thing, but it's just it's a unique event, and I think it's probably going to be a little wild in terms of predictability, but have fun with it, put some lineups out there, and should be a fun, unique event that's a little bit of a change of pace from what we usually get. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. You made some good points there. I think that's one of the things, and don't tilt too much. I mean, it's probably an event, you don't want to go all in it. I know people will talk about the advantage because of all the scoring and whatnot, but to be honest, a lot of people are pretty sharp nowadays. People are paying attention to this stuff. They all have access to the same Twitter notifications we're getting, and they're following along on all these updates. So you'll want to do stuff a little bit differently. You'll want to tune in, see what's going on with the, ownership and all that stuff. But I do want to say just, lastly, thank you guys so much for tuning into the show with us. TJ, thanks so much for having us on. Producer Devin, Simon, the guys been putting it on for us. I do appreciate you all. Everyone that's been tuning in, thank you so much for the support. If you want to follow along, follow me on Twitter at ToeTagginTambo. Hit me up in the Discord. Same thing. You guys can get a hold of me there. But we'll be back with some other content. You'll see us again. Just want to make sure you know that. And have some fun this week. Other than that, good luck.